So get ready. You're on candid camera. There we go. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, good. All right.
Yes.
As you all know, one of my things about classes is we participate, right? So if you have questions today, if anybody's working on a deal right now that might have a survey, or you have any questions on anything that we go over today, please, raise your hand. You can get on here and do the little high five thing, whatever it is. My chat window's open. I'm going to share my screen in a second. But yeah, feel free just to hit your space bar and speak up. And then we're going to dive right in. So today, Workshop Wednesday, we're going over residential surveys in Texas and T-47s as well. And we're going to kind of take a deeper dive and not just what a survey is, but different types of surveys, the ones that we typically utilize here in Texas real estate, and then maybe just a couple other ones that I'm going to take a quick note or a kind of a dive into and explain a few things. One of the biggest things, takeaways I like to people take away from this class is what to look for on a survey, when to ask for it when you're talking to a seller that may or may not have an existing survey. And then when they show one to you, maybe to know what to look for, just to give you a little bit extra education, enlighten you on what a lender or a title company is going to look for in those things. And then not for you guys to make a judgment call, okay, because it's not your job to do that. But just to kind of know, hey, yeah, this looks good, or yeah, probably not on this one, but I'll try to see if we can get it past whatever it is and kind of go from there. Okay. So let me share my screen. Excuse me. Forgive me, allergies right now. Killing me. So, and then let's get started. So, Workshop Wednesdays. I call this class T40 what? Because so many times that I've started back in real estate or taught new agents, people have asked me, what's a T47, right? I don't really know what that is. But then I kind of combine this class with the survey class. So let's start with, what is a survey? Okay, a lot of people think, and we're talking a survey, land survey. I'm not talking about, how would you rate my class from 0 to 10? And I know y'all all give me a 10 after this class. I appreciate and love you all. Y'all are fantastic. I'm not talking about that type of survey. I'm talking about a survey which is like a drawing of the property, right? But let's actually look at the definition real quick. So a survey refers to the process of locating and measuring a property's boundary lines to determine the exact amount of land that a homeowner has. Okay. So if we're looking at a house, right, and we want to see the quote unquote four corners of a survey, or however many corners it might have, if it has 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 corners, depending on how big the property is, it's telling us exactly how much land that homeowner owns, so the new buyer knows what they're getting, right? A survey will also locate and measure any easements or encroachments on a property, and that will be noted on the home's chain of title. Okay. So easements, encroachments, and then also what it shows is the property's boundary lines. Talking about the boundary lines itself of the property, but it's also going to show a drawing of the property, of the house, right? The building itself. And so you'll see the house on there. You'll see in today's surveys, or over the last really 15, 20 years of surveys, you're starting to see more and more detail. Where used to might just see a square block or a couple little jagged lines, some sort of polygon of the house, and then the boundary lines of the fence lines around it, right? Now you're seeing things like the house, you're seeing a rock patio, a concrete driveway, you might be seeing, planters or retaining walls, a swimming pool, things like that, that'll all be on that drawing, okay? And that's all the stuff you're gonna look for, because that will tell you if any of those improvements are in one of these easements or encroachments, right? So let's talk about in the contract part of it first. Okay. On the contract portion, second page of the contract, when you get into title policy and survey, in paragraph C of that, let's look at the survey paragraph real quick. Y'all have seen this before. I teach this in the contracts class that we do. The survey, it says right here. Come on. Ooh, I got somebody else joining in. Sorry, hold on one second. Getting him on there. Awesome. So you've got, sorry, I'm getting all jumbled up. There we go. Right here, the survey must be made by a registered professional land surveyor acceptable to the title company and buyer's lender, right? Or lenders, however many that is. Pretty simple there. It's just saying, hey, it's got to be a professional surveyor. I can't just go out, Andrew Patterson, me, go take a tape measure, right? And go start measuring properties and taking pictures. Okay, it doesn't quite work that way. I mean, I could try it. I could put a Patterson stamp on it. It would not get accepted by the title company. It would not get accepted by the lender, right? It has to be a professional land surveyor. Pretty simple there. And then you've got three options on this one where within blank days here at the beginning, you have box one, within so many days that the seller will furnish to the buyer and the title company that existing survey if they have one, and the T-47 affidavit. And go from there. And you have box 2 or 3, which says, hey, within so many days, either the buyer will get a new survey or the seller will get a new survey on box 3. Okay. This is repetitive of my contract class, but I like to go over it in this in case you're taking notes. Okay. When you get to this paragraph and you're filling out an offer for somebody, buyer's agents, okay, or listing agents, pay attention. If you ask the seller, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, do y'all have an existing survey? Okay. I want to make sure that's part of your question in your listing appointment. Okay. It needs to be part of your review with them. Okay. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, do y'all have an existing survey of the property? If their answer is yes, okay, then you are going to check box 1. Okay. If they have a yes to that question, that's the answer, then you check box 1 and we'll go through the number of days here in a minute. Typically, you might put within a day, 2 days, 3 days. A lot of times is what I see is kind of a norm on this. Within 3 days after the effective date of the contract, the seller shall furnish to buyer and the title company seller's existing survey of the property and a residential real property affidavit, otherwise known as a T-47. Okay. That means that the seller is going to get their copy of it, the existing survey. Here it is. Here's their T-47, goes with it, deliver it to the buyer and the title company. Okay. Here in bold, if the seller fails to furnish the existing survey. So if they say, yes, they have one, and they go, but I got to look for it. It's in a box in the attic or whatever it is. And then they do not get it. If they fail to furnish that existing survey or the affidavit. So if they don't get the survey or the T-47 within the time prescribed, okay, whatever days we're up here in this blank, then the buyer shall obtain a new survey, okay, which the title company can then order, okay, at the seller's expense, period. Okay, it's in bold. So listing agents, if they say they have one, get it. Do not miss that date, because if they don't get that in and they don't push it to the title company and to the buyer along with the signed T-47 affidavit within however many days you put in there, okay, then the buyer then can automatically order a new survey and put it on the seller's expense immediately. Michelle, you got a question?
Does it matter how old the survey is?
It does not. Okay. When we're talking with this, and now I'll say that that's a great question. She's asking, does the age of the survey matter? In relation to delivery of an existing survey, the answer is no. I do not care, nor should a title company. I mean, they might care as far as what they'll accept it or not, but according to the contract, I don't care if it's a 50-year-old survey, 100-year-old survey. If it's a survey, okay, and they say, hey, we've got it, and we'll give it to you within 3 days, and they deliver it, and they deliver it with a T-47 affidavit that says, hey, nothing's changed since the survey, except we added a pool and we put new fences and we added a guest house and all these things on there. As long as they do that, okay, and they go within the contract, they meet what the requirements are as far as delivery of that survey, then you, the listing agent, and the seller has done their job in paragraph 1 and you've delivered it. Okay, so let's move on. So let's say we've done that. So we have a 50-year-old survey, can't read it very well, but it is a survey, right? We deliver it. We're not sure it's going to be accepted or not by the title company or the lender. Then let's read on what the contract says. It says, if the existing survey or affidavit is not acceptable to the title company or the buyer's lender or lenders, the buyer shall obtain a new survey at either seller's or buyer's expense, no later than 3 days prior to closing. So that states it's all about how you negotiated that. So if I was a listing agent and I wanted to best represent my seller and they had an old survey, let's say it was 50 years old, it might look okay. It's questionable if I can read it or not, or maybe it doesn't have everything on there, or maybe we've added some decking or some concrete and it might not get accepted by the title company or the lender, but I've got it and I get a T-47 signed with it and I put them together and I deliver them to the title company and to the buyer within 3 days or whatever days I put there. Then I've done my job. And then after a few days of the title company reviewing that survey, they come back and they say, hey, we can't accept this, cannot, because we can't read it, or you've added a pool and it might be an easement. We need to make sure that's not in an easement. So we need you to go get a new survey. If I was a listing agent doing a good job and I put, hey, buyer shall obtain a new survey at buyer's expense right here, then guess what? I just saved my seller $500 or more, right? Because that's about what it cost. Okay, most lot and block surveys in DFW right now can be done for anywhere between $400 and $500. And normally around $450, $475 or so. And then if they're higher priced, larger homes, acreage, larger tracts, things like that, you might see that creep up into the 600, 700, 800 thousands. It just depends. If you have a special property, I'd encourage you to get a quote on a survey. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So big thing on that. Michelle, is it good there to answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, so that's kind of paragraph one. Like I said, when y'all ask that original question, it always goes back to that first question in our listing appointment or interview of, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, do you have an existing survey of the property? If the answer is yes, you check box 1 and you move through this paragraph and work on your negotiating tactics. If the buyer, okay, if you're a buyer agent, you might say, hey, hey, just wanted to drop this in there. You don't see it in transaction desk, but do your sellers have an existing survey? If they say yes, they do, be like, great, check box 1, put within 3 days or 2 days or whatever you want. And then you can even try to slide in buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense if they don't have it. May or may not work. In these days right now, if you're multiple offers, you might go ahead and just say, hey, look, if it doesn't get accepted, my buyers will go ahead and pay that expense as well, just to add a little bit to the offer. Because that would save the seller another $500 or so if their current one doesn't get accepted. But just know that and set the expectations accordingly for your clients. Okay. If you ask the question, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, okay, or you're a buyer's agent and you're asking the listing agent, hey, do you have an existing survey? And they say, no, we don't have one. Then you are going to check either box 2 right here or 3, depending on what offer you're placing in or what you're negotiating. If you're going to say, hey, my buyer, if you're a buyer agent representing the buyer, say my buyer will get a new survey, then you're going to check box 2 and put within blank days. And in this case, I'd like to extend those days out. If my buyer is going to get a new survey, A, I want to make sure it goes through the option period. B, I need to give myself enough time for a surveyor to get out there and get the survey completed. Okay. And that depends on a few things, how far out they are, and then weather. Right? Weather permitting, because they can't go do a survey when it's pouring down rain like it has been. So it might need a week or 2 to get the survey done. So I might say, hey, within 10 days, 15 days, possibly, after the effective date of the contract, buyer shall obtain a new survey at buyer's expense. I might say 20 days on this if I can get that slid in there as a buyer to say, hey, I want to wait till I make sure I'm fully approved for the loan and through the underwriting part before I go spend my buyer's money. Because if you put box 2 on here and you put it at buyer's expense and the title company goes and orders a survey to where you're not in default here, make sure you get it done within 10 days or 15 days, and they go order a survey, who's on the hook for the cost of that survey? Does anybody know that answer?
Can you say that again?
Absolutely. If the sellers don't have an existing survey and I do box 2, let's say I put within 15 days after the effective date of the contract, buyer shall obtain a new survey at a buyer's expense. So we get to day 5 or 10 or something like that, and title company reaches out and says, hey, you have to have this survey by day 15. You want me to go ahead and order this survey? You say yes. Go ahead and order the survey. They order it. Okay. Survey comes in. All of a sudden, something goes wrong with financing, it doesn't work out, or your buyer now wants to back out for whatever reason. Who at this point technically is on the hook to pay for that survey?
The buyer.
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 100%. You've given the authority to the title company to order that survey, okay? And what they'll do is, let's say your buyer backs out, and they can, let's say they back out because they have days on the third-party financing to back out. Let's say it doesn't appraise, but you already ordered the survey, right? And so you back out because it didn't appraise. What the title company should do is take from your earnest money, let's say it's a $3,000 earnest money, they will take the $500 out of the earnest money to pay for the survey and refund the $2,500 difference back to the buyer. Okay. They're allowed to do that via the contract. So just know your days about that. Know how the survey is getting ordered. Be in touch. If you're a buyer agent, make sure you're talking with your lender and seeing what stage they're at in the approval process. Okay. But if you put on here that, hey, within blank days on box 2, that your buyer is going to get a survey, more than likely your buyer is going to need to be out that money, and they'll get a survey on a property that hopefully the deal will go through. But if not, they're just going to have a survey on a property they're not buying, and just know that that's a possibility. Now, could you sell it back to the seller? Maybe. I don't know. I've tried to do that before. There's options in there. And if you get to that point, just let us know. Okay. If you negotiate the seller to pay for it, then you would put box 3 within blank days after the effective date of the contract, seller at seller expense shall furnish a new survey to the buyer. And that's how you move. Okay. Any questions?
Andrew, taking away the current crazy market where, buyers are literally giving everything to the seller, in a traditional market, what would be the norm?
It's a good question. It's hard to have a norm on this because it is a negotiable part where if you're really good at negotiating, then this is when you can really, move the check boxes around on and really negotiate some. And it's not like it's a lot. It depends on what it is. If you're dealing with a large acreage tract and it could be a $2,000 survey, you're talking about some pretty good money. But in the case that it's a lot in block, you're talking about $400 or $500. However, in a normal market, something like this, I would say if they have an existing survey, I'm typically using box 1, and I'm just going to negotiate whether my buyers are going to have to pay for a new one or the seller is going to pay for it if it's not accepted. And then if they don't have one, I'm typically trying to check box, on this. If it's a market that's not such a crazy seller's market like it is right now, if it was an equal market or more on the buy side like it was years ago, then I would probably say, hey, within box 3, if I'm a buyer agent, I'm putting box 3 because I'm going to say I want the seller to pay for it, right? If I'm a listing agent, I want to see box 2 or box 1 if my sellers have a survey, and then I want to put the expense of the buyer. So it really just depends on negotiating, is all it is. It's no really a norm on that. It's who wants to take the cost of the survey, because it is a cost that's required. If I wanted to argue that on one side or the other, if I was a listing agent and I had a cash offer over here, guess what? I don't have to negotiate a survey because a cash offer doesn't necessarily have to have a survey. It's not required. It's required by a lender. And so that's one thing on there. But if I have a buyer that has to get a loan because they don't have cash, I would say, hey, your lender is requiring the survey. So I don't have one. I want you pay for it. And it's just negotiating. Good question. So it's just one of those things that you have to kind of work through. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Another part of the contract on here, I'm not going to go through as much detail on this one, but below paragraph C on the survey portion, you've got objections. Okay. And I just want y'all to all pay attention on what this states. Basically, it's that, hey, you've got your objections paragraph in here saying, hey, if you object to a certain that prohibits the following use or activity, right in here, that says if you can't use the property for something specific, like I want to put an Olympic size swimming pool in and they can't fit that, or I want to have livestock, or I want to use this as a home daycare or multifamily use or a rental, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a short-term rental. You want to use it for an Airbnb. And then all of a sudden it comes back from title work and you can't use this specific use in here, then that's your out. However, why I like to highlight the objections paragraph when I'm talking about the survey is this. I'm going to show you just down here. Well, first of all, here at the top, buyer may object in writing to defects, exceptions, or encumbrances to title. Okay. But they can also object anything disclosed on the survey. Okay. other than items listed in 6A up in the above paragraph. You have to go back and look the contract to look at that. Mainly what I like to look at on this is, y'all, separate from whatever objection you put in this paragraph, if there is anything on the survey that your buyers want to object to that's not already listed in paragraph 6A 1 through 9, which is the paragraph title right above on the contract. If there's anything else, for example, if there's an easement that shows up that you thought was a 5-foot easement, but it's actually a 15-foot easement from the back, and now they don't have room to put a pool in, you don't have to have swimming pool right here. If that easement's larger than what your buyers thought it was going to be, and they want to object to that, they absolutely can. That is something on the survey that has been disclosed. That's new information to your buyers, and that would be an out on the survey. Okay. So really it comes down to anything that comes up on a survey, especially this, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a new survey, okay, so buyer's agents, if you're ever looking for an out and you get a new survey, the moment you get that new survey, you look at it, you have 5 days to look at that survey. Shows right down here, 5 days. Okay. You have 5 days to look at that survey. And if anything on there your buyer objects to and wants to back out, they can. It is a catch-all on that survey. It could be an easement. It could be a building line that they don't like because they were going to try to add a casita and now they can't. It could be that I've seen different properties have water restrictions put on the survey that says that's in an area out in the country that says, hey, this specific survey, this specific property is in an area where you can't have any type of livestock because it collects water to give well water to the rest of the area. And so they can't have livestock here. And what if they wanted to have horses or a cow? Now they can't. They could back out there. So the survey, a new survey, is really kind of a catch-all there. It's pretty neat. Connor, you got a question?
Yeah. So I was just wondering, I stepped out for a little bit. I was just wondering, do you have to put the specific activity on the blank right there, or is it just like before the contract is signed, or is that just would you fill that in after you receive the survey?
Good question. You would put if it is a specific actual use that you're looking for, separate from the survey, right? If it is, if, for example, if you wanted to put a pool in, okay, then you might want to put that in there. Say, hey, being that I can, that's just saying that you can, but you're allowed to put a pool in, right? What if you're in an HOA or an area that they just don't allow pools? I don't really know many of those, right? But let's say you had one. Or if it was that you wanted to have chickens, right? You wanted to be in Arlington and you wanted to have and you're not sure if they allow it or not. That's what it would be. You put that there. Other than that, I wouldn't put anything in the activity if it's just about something on the survey. I would wait till you survey, take a look at it, and then if you need to object, take an objection back.
Okay, so you can add, like, it's probably recommended to put the objections in beforehand and just for general specific use, and then you would put anything on the survey.
You got to have that objection in there in place before you execute anyway, because you're probably not going to add an objection.
Right.
If you have it, go ahead and put it in there, and then if a survey objection comes back afterwards, then you put it there.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So, anybody else? Michelle, I see your hands up. I don't know if you have a question. Are you good?
No, I did. No, I have a question. So, and I kind of told you yesterday that I had this weird situation. So my client bought a piece of land from a developer.
Yep.
The developer, which they don't, the developer didn't have a survey. Well, they did, but it was of like the whole area, not real specific to the lot.
Which
so
is normal in those. Normally, a developer has a large, like a site map, a site plan survey, and it's one of the surveys. Will actually, I have that on a list of mine, and then they won't go through the expense of doing individual lot and block surveys until a builder actually builds.
Right. So it was a cash transaction. So we, after we closed, we asked the seller, because the seller kept saying they had a survey, and then we're like, no, this isn't a survey of that specific piece of land. So the seller went ahead and ordered the survey and paid for the survey. I mean, the seller, the developer. So they paid for the survey. Survey comes back to us, and there is a pretty substantial part of the property that's in the 100-year floodplain. Because this is out on Lake Ray Hubbard. So the seller, we had a meeting and he said that that was incorrect and that FEMA was making the correction and it would take like 6 weeks to get a new survey.
Wow. Okay.
So we own the property, and it happens to be my parents. So we own the property. We were going to build our plan was to build a spec house on it.
Okay.
Now that was in February and we still don't have a corrected survey. So do we have any recourse?
So you closed on it, not having the survey as part of the contract originally.
Correct.
Well, and then you realized the floodplain was in there after the fact. Am I understanding this correct?
After the fact, the seller ordered the survey for us because we needed the survey to know the dimensions that we had to work with when we were having the architect design the plans.
So the developer that you bought it from ordered the survey for you. Y'all paid for it.
No, he paid for it.
Oh, he paid for it. Okay, cool. That's nice.
He paid for it. And then when it came back, we're like, wait a minute, because there's the 100-year floodplain was taking up a large portion of the area where we wanted to put the home.
Yeah.
It would be almost impossible. And I mean, you can build on it, but it changes a lot of things. So the seller, we had a meeting and the seller said that he realized that, which he should have already realized it because it's 4 lots in a row and it would absolutely be the same on all 4 lots. And now it's been since February because the developer is also a builder. And so he's the one we were going to have build the spec house for us.
Yeah. If I were you, I would do this. I would stop going through the developer to get with this. I would get with the survey company themselves and ask them point blank, because to me, it doesn't sound like it's incorrect. For a surveyor to screw up and put a floodplain in there when it's not in the floodplain is highly unlikely. Now, in a minute, though, I might answer your question on something else you could do, Michelle. Okay. So give me a few slides and I'll come back to your example here in just a minute, okay?
Okay, thanks.
You bet. All right, let's moving on. All right, so let's talk about some fun facts real quick, different types of surveys. There are lots of different types of surveys. This is just fun facts. There will not be a quiz at the end of this class, I promise. And so just to kind of know, hey, there's more than just 2 or 3 surveys. A lot of people are like, hey, what are the main couple surveys? A lot of you have probably heard of lot and block, right? A lot and block, or what I call a kind of a land title survey. Okay. That's the one we deal with 99% of the time, right? Maybe 98% of the time or so in our deals. You may have also heard of meets and bounds, right? A meets and bounds survey is one that hasn't been basically transferred or conformed into a lot and block survey yet because it's still acreage, or it was just a new survey has not been done on it in so many years that it hasn't been converted into a lot and block survey. It's just meets and bounds, which just basically gives a proper description. It's kind of like just verbiage, a lot of language that's written in there. And we'll look at an example of that here in just a second too. So let's look at the many types of surveys. First of all, you have an ALTA land survey, okay? For those of you that don't know what ALTA stands for, that's American Land Title Association. Now, ALTA's land survey, it's kind of a funny name. I just like to call them lot and block. ALTA is American Land Title Association. It's all across America. In Texas, we use, it's a Texas Title Association. There's a TLTA, Texas Land Title Association, which we do separate from ALTA. And so ALTA is mostly in other states. Texas, we do our own, but typically we call those lots and blocks, right? Lot and block surveys. Also a boundary survey, okay? So a boundary survey is more of a broader survey, which can show you just your boundary lines of things. A lot of times, like a developer, for example, like your case, Michelle, that bought it before, they might just want a survey just showing all the boundary lines and not necessarily all the buildings inside, because they can get it less expensive than going and showing everything on the property. A construction survey is one that obviously it's self-explanatory. You would get that for, let me see if I can admit this person in. There we go. For constructions dealing with new construction stuff. There we go. Location surveys is another one. You've got subdivision surveys, which is a developer would use. Site planning, in the case that you would be doing sometimes in commercial, if you're actually planning different multiple buildings on one site. There's topographic surveys as well, which we'll talk about in a moment. A topographical survey is also a survey that's known as an elevation survey, AKA an elevation certificate, that we'll talk about here in just a moment. There's other types of surveys too. There's construction staking, there's land partitions, you've got easement surveys. So there's lots of different ones on here, well staking and even more. So y'all, there's a lot of different types of surveys that surveyors can do. But the main two that we're really going to talk about today are land surveys, land title surveys, or lot and block. And then briefly meets and bounds and elevation. Okay. So there's some fun information for you. Lots of stuff they do. Okay. Look at a couple examples real quick. Okay, there's a copy of a survey here. The one on the left that you see here, this shows pretty simple. This would be an example of a lot and block survey. See how it says lot 5 right here? It's just to the inside of lot 4 and the inside of lot 6.
Can you zoom in on that?
Yeah, I can try. I'm going to here in just a moment. I'll have one that comes up. Do you have a question about it? No, good.
Sorry, I forgot to. No, I just can't see it.
Okay, yeah, it's cool. I'm going to zoom in on one here in just a moment.
Okay.
So a couple examples on here. This is kind of more of a boundary survey that looks up here. It's showing just boundary lines on the street itself. And then this little small one here, it shows this. This is a meets and bounds, right? It really shows a meets and bounds, kind of a legal description type. So what I mean by meets and bounds, it says, I'm going to read a little bit of you, for those of you that can't see it because it's kind of small, I'll read it. So this order number, doesn't have the order number on there, deleted that, but it says being a portion of a 19.810 acre of land situated in the Hester Langston Survey, abstract number 983, Tarrant County, Texas, conveyed RHSY. Gene Hess, as recorded in volume 4232, page 120, deed records, Tarrant County, Texas, and portion of being tract of land, la da 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 da, right? And then it says beginning at a found 3/8 inch iron rod for the called northwest corner of said 19.1. What this is doing, I want you to meets and bounds is saying, hey, we went out, literally physically went out, and we found an iron rod, right, stuck in the ground that was hammered in there years ago, and we start right there. There's our point. Okay, same being the esterly line of Levy County Line Road. So maybe it's on the corner of Levy County Line Road. And then from there, thence they go north at a 58 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds east. Okay, so northeast at 58 degrees along the northerly line of said 19.21 acre tract at a distance of 532.42 feet. So the way you would read that is you'd start at that point, that iron rod, you would move northeast 58 degrees for 532 feet, and then they would land to a 5/8 inch capped iron rod for the next corner. Okay, now I do not expect any of y'all to really do the due diligence and go walk a property and try to find iron rods, but just for fun facts, this is what a meets and bounds survey is. Okay, so if you ever have somebody that has a survey and it's currently meets and bounds and it needs to be converted to a lot and block for the sale because the lender requires something like that, you might be talking about a little bit more expensive survey. Okay, because the surveyor literally has to go out and walk this to make sure it's correct, to put it from a physical 3/8 or 5/8 inch or half-inch iron rod, right, piece of rebar in the land, in the ground, find it if they can, hopefully, and then redo that to a lot and block, and then start doing it digitally with the equipment they now use. Make sense? Welcome to 2021 and Google Earth and all that fun stuff, because that's what a lot of these guys use, and they use their system to record all of it. And so eventually, as Texas grows and we keep getting more and more people coming in and doing newer builds, and or properties get sold to one buyer to another, and we get these lot and blocks in that they get recorded, eventually we'll have a lot of the property, most of it in the DFW area or Texas, being lot and block and all recorded, and be pretty simple for us to just transfer over. But we're definitely still in the range, in the realm of still doing updated surveys, getting them from meets and bounds to lot and block. And so now I just wanted to understand what that is. Okay. Any questions? Okay, here we go. Moving on. So let's talk about survey requirements. Okay, so if you were to ask a seller, hey, do you have an existing survey? And they say, yes, we do. Be like, perfect. Do you have it? Let's take a look at it. Say, I'm just kind of curious. And they pull it out. There are a few things, bullet points that I want to go over with you guys that you can take a look for. Okay. And these are simplistic kind of requirements. There are other requirements that's required by a title company or a lender. And most lenders go based off what the title company says, because a title company might be the one to actually put the survey insurance coverage on it. So a lender usually defaults to the title company's ruling on that, their judgment call. But these are just some simple bullet point requirements, what you as an agent could look for too. Okay. So first things first, the survey must be clear and legible. Okay. If it's a 50-year-old survey or 30 years old or 20 or whatever it is, if it's an older survey and you can't read it, okay. If a lot of the description on there is kind of blacked out, if it's just faded, whatever it is, if you can't read everything on there, it's clear and legible, that's probably not going to be able to be used. Okay. It has to be clear and legible. That's one of the first requirements. Okay. It must have a property description on it. Okay. Now, this requirement I've seen a little bit lax on some surveys, where if it's not actually on the survey, but it's attached on an exhibit A to go along with it, then I've gotten that approved before. Okay. But typically that property description has to be on there. A lot of times they do a really good job. Most surveyors these days do a good job of putting the property description, the legal description, on the actual page of the survey. Okay. And I'll show you that in a moment. It must have the surveyor's signature on the survey. If it is not signed by the surveyor, and typically that's a stamp signed by the surveyor's company, right? The surveyor that did it, but it could be a handwritten signature too. Okay. If they do things a little old school, some surveyors still do that, but it has to be on that survey. If it's not on the survey, title company is not going to accept it, and the lender is not going to either. So you want to see that. Okay. And now if somebody comes on there and say you have a survey and it doesn't have a signature on there, you don't see a signature. Okay. The good way to respond to that is say, hey, look, probably should have a signature on there. I don't see it. However, I'm going to go ahead and suit this over. Let's go ahead and get a T-47 and go ahead and sign this and get this sent over to the title company. Why? Because technically, do you have a survey? Look at my head. Yes, you do. Okay. You do have a survey. Will it get accepted? Probably not. Okay. However, can you deliver that survey still to the title company and do your job as the listing agent on box 1 of the survey paragraph? Yes, you can. Okay. And then if it's not accepted, is what it is. Then it goes based off that bottom line on that paragraph of seller's or buyer's expense. Okay. So anything on there, say, hey, I'm not sure if it'll get accepted, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, but I'll sure we'll go ahead and submit it and see what they say. Okay. It must have a surveyor's stamp. Okay. It's their seal when they actually put it on there. It's a stamp. A surveyor shows on there. It's typically a round stamp on there. You'll see that seal on the survey itself. It must be on there. It cannot, it must be fully on that page as well. Okay. It's got to be legible, all of the above. And it cannot be cut off. Okay. And what I mean by that, no part of the survey can be cut off. If it's missing part of the survey, you can't see the description, or if the signature seal or the stamp's been cut off a little bit, okay, that is not going to get accepted. It can't be cut off. So if you have a picture, okay, or a quick scan that the seller sent to you and you can't see it, go ahead and say, hey, if it's easier, let me come pick that original survey up from you, because it might be clearer that way. That way I can read it. It might have the full stamp and survey, proper description, everything on there. And let's actually take that and do a better scan or hand deliver that to the title company. Okay.
Yeah, it's me again.
Come on.
Sorry. So because I think I'm going to run into this with a client I'm working with. If you have a meets and bounds survey, will a lender generally accept that, or are they going to require a new survey?
That is a great question. So with that, it really depends on the lender and the situation on there. They might say it depends on the amount of equity that's in the deal. But if they're going to be putting a large amount of money on equity, or a large amount of their higher loan value, and there's less equity brought from the borrower on that point, it's kind of a judgment call on the underwriter of that lender. Because they might require, say, hey, if I'm putting up, for example, let's say you have a person that's 5% down So the loan to value is 95% that the mortgage company is putting their money out there. Let's say it's a $200,000 house and $190,000 of that money is coming from the lender. They are more than likely going to require a new survey because they want to see exactly what they're loaning $190,000 on. Okay. How much, where the building sits, is it sitting in a floodplain, something like that? Those are things. And a meets and bounds might not show that. More than likely, yes, Michelle, they're going to require a new survey. Case in point, the deal you just talked about, if a lender's loaning a bunch of money on a piece of property and it shows that part of it's in the flood zone, okay, they need to know what part of the house is going to be in there, if it's in the flood zone or not, because they need to know if they're going to need flood insurance on that house.
Right.
Protect their $190,000 or $300,000 or $500,000 investment, because that's their asset at that point. So the lender might very well require a new survey. If they do, then it goes back to the paragraph of, hey, you delivered a survey. And guess what? A meets and bounds, is that a survey? Yes, it is. So if you deliver a meets and bounds and a T-47 saying, hey, since that survey, we haven't made any changes, okay? And the lender comes back and goes, well, we need a lot and block survey. And it said, hey, at seller's expense, then the seller has to pay for it. Or if it said buyer's expense, buyer would pay for it.
Gotcha.
Got it?
Thanks.
Awesome. Great question. So there's some requirements for y'all on that, kind of what you'd be looking for. So really simple things: description on there, surveyor signature, stamp, and it can't be cut off. Got to be able to read it. Okay. Let's look at a little bit closer to a couple examples. Okay. So here's a survey that I got. Hey, and these are, by the way, actual surveys that I've received back when I was in Untitled. So these are not fake, they're legitimate surveys. You can see this one on here. I've got you can see it comes off the road over here. I've whited out some of the streets, but you can see the driveway comes off the road, goes up here. This is all concrete driveway. Front yard's here. Okay, here's the house. Okay, nice, good size, big old house. Okay, got some yard here, got more decking and everything around here, and got a pool right here. You can see where it says pool. It's kind of small. Got some decking here. This is the pool decking around it. Okay, so what am I seeing? Okay, seeing a few things. First of all, first thing when I first saw this is we got this survey in here. I was like, oh, okay, got some pretty interesting stuff. There's a 7.5 foot utility easement right here. So there's 7.5 feet that they've got for utilities to come in and do some work. Well, guess what? About 2 to 3 foot or so, all the way down this side of this pool is built where? In the easement. Okay, so hopefully, luckily, this house has been there long enough, built in the easement, that hopefully the easements are overhead easements, like electric lines, things like that, and that they don't have to come in here and ever work on this. Because if they ever had to come in here, what's the risk for the buyer? The risk is that if they have to dig up in this easement, they're going to lose a lot of their pool surround, and hopefully they can just dig the pool surround up and not have to go into the pool. Because technically, they built that pool inside the easement. And if any utility company or anybody need to come in there and use it, could they dig that? You bet they could, if they had to. Hopefully they would get around it. And most utility companies are good about that. But these are the types of things you'd want to look at. Okay. So let's talk about this one as far as requirements go, right? What's missing on this drawing?
The stamp, the signature.
Boom, boom. What else?
Property description.
There you go. So my property description is not there at the top right-hand corner. I don't have a signature anywhere, and I'm not seeing a seal either. So I'd be looking at those 3 places. So right there and tell you, hey, that's great. Okay. Now I'm going to say this one more time, and I might say this a couple more times. Do we have a survey?
Nope.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
what?
This is a survey. If my seller said, I've got a survey and they showed me this, I'm saying, great. Yes, we got a survey. I'm going to check box 1. I'm going to deliver this with a T-47. Would this get accepted at the title company?
No.
Okay. It would not. But we've got a survey on here. Okay. And so I'm going to deliver this. I'm not going to tell the seller, hey, I don't know about this, whatever it is. I'm going to deliver it. I'm going to put it out there. Okay. In this case, what I try to teach buyers, agents, before you put on box 1 that, hey, they have an existing survey, before you agree to be at buyer's expense, if it's not accepted, take a look at that survey first. Okay. I'm trying to get y'all to see that, hey, this is some good information that if you do due diligence as a buyer agent, before you execute a contract saying that they've said, hey, we do have an existing survey, before you say, okay, great, we'll do box one. And then if it's not accepted, we'll do buyer's expense. Ask them to see that survey first and say, I want to see it. Because then if it doesn't have these three things, you know, it's not going to get accepted. You know that your buyer is going to be out that expense. And before you guarantee them into a $500 expense, take a look at this first. It's called due diligence. Sometimes we got to do a little bit of it. Okay. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. Take a look at another one real quick. Another example, kind of zoomed in on one. Okay. What's wrong with this one?
It's cut off at the bottom.
Beautiful. Okay. It's cut off at the bottom. Now I have the surveyor certification kind of shown there. I've got a property description at the top. That looks good. Okay. But I see a part of a stamp. Okay. But it's cut off and I can't tell, is there a signature at the bottom of that or not? I don't know. So this was one that was scanned over to me and I said, hey, it looks great. I can't see the bottom of it. The seller came back and said, oh yeah, I've got it. It just cut off. Sorry. Because they scanned it in a legal form, but it scanned only the letter. So it cut the bottom couple inches off. And then I had them to rescan it back over and they scanned the whole thing and we were good to go. Okay. It's definitely some things I'm looking for though is, hey, if it's cut off though, if that's the only thing they got. Okay. And I've seen this many, many times before where a seller of a property, when they bought the property, they got this. Okay. And the previous agent did a bad job for them getting a full copy and now they can't use that and it cost them $500. Okay. So know when you're working with your buyer, if they get a survey, whether it was required or not, y'all, especially cash deals, cash buyers, if they got this copy of the survey, all right, ask if they have a better copy of it. Because if your cash buyers decide to sell later, okay, and they never get a good copy of the survey, it's going to cost them down the road if they have to pay for another one, if they negotiate it that way. Okay, so always a great thing to ask, to know what types of things to look for. This looks like a pretty good survey, but it would not get accepted by a title company or a lender because it's cut off. Okay. All right, we're going to take a little bit closer look, and I'm going to go over just a few things of the survey that I like to look at. Okay. So looking at here, everybody see my little laser pointer still okay? Okay. So on the left-hand side over here, look at the top. I've got a really good legible survey. Okay. This is up here, lot 10, block 1, Villas of La Frontera South, phase 1, everything on there. So it looks good. I would make sure that that matched. I would verify that that is the legal description. Okay. Over here, they're saying, according to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, flood insurance rate map, community parcel dated here, property does not lie within a 100-year flood hazard area. Okay. Great information from the surveyor saying, hey, it's not in a floodplain. Cool. All right. They've got their scale over here, what they're looking for. Okay. Scale 1 inch is 20 feet. Additional building lines, easements, per zoning requirements, just things that are just notes from the surveyor. Okay. And then we've got little dots over here, right? So what does it show? Hey, they found a 1/2 inch iron rod right here. They found another 1/2 inch iron rod here. 1/2 inch iron rod found, IRF. Okay. They have a couple easements put on here. Notice these little dotted lines here, right? This dotted line right here I'm looking at, and this line pointed to it, that is a 10-foot TXU easement. So that's TXU Energy, has a 10-foot easement from the back. Okay. And now when they pointed this right here, I'll show you this, just some fun stuff. This OHE, does anybody know what that stands for?
Overhead.
There you go. That is an overhead easement. Okay. Which tells me what? Tells me that the 10-foot TXU easement is an overhead hanging electrical line. Okay. Now, could TXU one day want to come and bury that line? Yes, they could. And if they did, then they would want that 10-foot easement still in there, which tells me what? If I'm building a pool, I need to keep the pool where? Within these easement lines. Okay. If I build it into the easement, I would be what? I would be taking a risk that they might come in and have to move that at some point. Okay. Typically, at the bottom of a good survey, I'm looking on the right-hand side over here. I want to show y'all, most good surveyors now do a really good legend here at the bottom. See this legend at the bottom? Shows you everything. Okay. For example, if you're wanting to tell what this line on the outside is here, okay. First of all, the green line that you can kind of see, I don't know if you want to see that or not. The green solid line in this case on this survey is the property line. That is the actual boundary line. Okay, is the green line. That's why they put it in green on here. Okay, which means they did a pretty good job of this fence, right? See this fence line at the top, the fence line you'll see right here, the wood fence is a solid line with 2 slashes. That's the wood fence. And it goes right on the boundary line here at the back. And it goes pretty much on the boundary line here on this side. It kind of comes in just a little bit. You can see, because you can see the green line on the outside, and then it moves across back to the house. Okay. And notice on this side that the fence is the fence right here directly on the green property line. No, it's not. It's only about maybe a foot or so outside of that, which what you would call that is an encroachment. Okay. The fence that we have, okay, is encroaching on the neighbor lot 11 right here on their property line. Now, are they throwing a fuss about that? I don't know. Could they? Possibly. Or they want to go through the expense of a fence to do it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I will say this. Honorary buyers, though, that come in here, if you own this property and they buy it, and all of a sudden lot 11 comes in, they buy and they go, hey, your fence is a foot on my property. I want to move. And they want to sue you for that. Could they do that? They could. I hope they don't. And they're just okay with it, encroaching a little bit, y'all, but you can't control other people. And some people might have an issue with that. So it would be good to understand what that is. That is technically an encroachment on that other property. Okay. Right here, you're seeing another line, solid line with a little dash line on here. That's a 5-foot building line. BL is a building line, which means they could not build the house anymore inside that. That's a deed restriction, okay, by the city zoning on there saying, hey, you can't build past that. So they have a few feet actually. They actually built the house about 5 foot inside the building line. So if they actually wanted to do an extension, an add-on or something like that, that's only 5 feet. I don't know what you really do with that, but they could. Okay. On the right-hand side, this is the bottom half of that survey. Okay. Look at the front. You can see on the front right here, there's a 20-foot building line. Okay. And they built within that. Okay. But that's the furthest, as close to the road as they could get is that 20-foot building line. And they stayed within that. Okay. If it was built outside and they encroached on that building line, you might have a problem with the city because they have encroached on the building line. Now, obviously a driveway is okay because it's not a structure. Okay. But any structure has to stay within the building line. Okay. Good. Okay. Other little small things they show on here. You can see there's that iron rod as well here. They're showing some information, what it is. There's the property line. And in this case, the property line actually goes to not even the edge of the, not even to the street. It actually goes to the edge of the sidewalk here. Okay. Which tells me that the city on this takes care, they own the streets and everything in this case. You've got some measurements on here, a 10-foot utility easement up front. And then right over here, you can see telephone pedestals here. And then this ET is an electrical transformer, just some other information on there, right? So pretty neat information there. Concrete drive. If they had a pool, obviously it would be on here. Now, let's really quick talk about that. Let's say you get to a property, you get this survey, you see it, and the property has a pool. However, it's not, they just put the pool in 6 months ago or a year ago, and it's not on the survey, okay? And they send this in, it has a pool. Would this be accepted by a title company?
No.
No, it would not, okay? Unless the seller or you, the buyer, doesn't bring it up and they lie about it on the T-47, okay? What I mean by that is a T-47 affidavit is signed. They sign the T-47 affidavit to say, hey, this is our one-page promise that since the date of this survey, since 11/13 of 2019, okay, we have made no changes to the survey since November of 2019. And they sign that and put it in there. And then no one catches it. And it goes all the way to closing and it closes. And they don't catch that there's a pool. Okay. Well, here's the problem. They lied about that, right? Then you wouldn't have coverage for that survey by the title company anymore. Okay. If it's not on here, it needs to be caught and you need to bring it up and a new survey would have to be used. Okay. A pool, especially if you've moved fences, if you've added on things back here in the back, okay, it's a possibility you might get it accepted, but you definitely need to bring it up to the title company. Y'all, I have had times where, for example, this little, maybe 8 foot by 8 foot concrete pad on the back patio here, they've extended it and made it a big, 20 foot by 10 foot or 30 foot by 10 foot, all the way across the back side and put ceiling fans in and made a nice patio. Okay. First of all, is that permanent structure that they added? Yes, it is. Would it need to be notated on the T-47? Yes, it would. Could it be accepted by the title company and the lender? It could. Okay. And I've had it times, and you just need to ask the title company, hey, what do we need to do? They've added on some stuff. More than likely, they will ask you to use a pencil and kind of draw it on, okay, and show them what it is, okay, and then submit it with an explanation on the T-47, what they did. And a lot of times, if it's shown within the easements, so it's inside the building easements, like these building lines, and it doesn't go inside an easement or it's not next to the fence, it's not encroaching anything, they might very well go ahead and accept it and not require a new survey. Okay, which is good. If you've added a bunch of decking and they go out here and they put a deck on this back corner, like a stage for some live music or something like that, and they build it right here or on this north corner right here, and it's in the easement, if it's permanent, they might require a new survey because now it's going to show that that's now an encroachment on those easements, and they want to have that notated because that's going to be an exception to the survey coverage for the title company. Does that make sense? Okay. So those are kind of some fun things to look at for that. All right.
So if they put let's say a big pergola back there, that would not be considered permanent?
If it's on concrete, is it permanent?
Yes.
Yeah, bet. I would consider that permanent. I would say, hey, we put a pergola back here and we drew it on. I would draw it on and say what it is and say it's a pergola with a concrete pad, that's 12 foot by 12 foot or whatever back in the back corner. I would draw it on there. I would still submit it to the title company and see what they say. But more than likely, Michelle, they're going to say, no, we need to get a new survey because it's encroaching on this easement. Because What if TXU comes in 5 years later and says, hey, we're now burying all the lines in here and we're going to put them in there. And hey, we got to, now they might not, they might be okay with it because TXU might even come in and say, hey, no, 10 foot, 12 foot pad, we can bore underneath that and bury our line. But if they decide they can't bore, or what if that has a break and one day they've got to do it, they might have to knock up that concrete. They're going to put that expense on your buyer that's buying the property. Okay. So that's why the lender might come back and require a new one in the title company. All righty.
Yep. Thank you.
You bet. All right, here we go. Talk about T-47 real quick. Okay. What is a T-47? Okay. A T-47 is also known as a residential real property affidavit. Okay. Just so you guys know, an affidavit, the definition of that is basically like a sworn statement. Okay. An affidavit is a notarized document that tells the buyer what the seller knows about the home's boundaries. Okay. Think of it like the seller's disclosure for the house itself. This is kind of, hey, this is what we know about the survey, right? So the affidavit is used for that. It's a 1 page or 1.5 page, depending on the one you print off, sworn promise that says, hey, this is who we are. This is the property description, legal description. We're in Tarrant County, Texas. We promise since the date of this survey, we have not added any other structures. We haven't added a swimming pool. We haven't changed the fence lines, boundary lines. Hey, this is this. And we promise and we get it signed and notarized. Okay. So let's take a look at it. This is what a T-47 looks like right here. Okay. Has information at the top that you'll want to know how to fill in, how to help. It says title company as used here and as a title insurance company whose policy of insurance is issued in reliance to the statements below. So the title company requires this. It's part of the contract. Like I said before, when you are delivering an existing survey, you need to have the existing survey and this T-47. If you only deliver the existing survey and you do not have this filled out and attached to it, technically you're in default of that paragraph and you have not properly delivered the survey in T-47, which means if within the 3 days that you're supposed to do that, if that's the number of days you used, and you didn't give the T-47 as well, could the buyer say you're in default and ask the seller for a new survey and for them to pay for it? Yes, they could. Okay. So listing agents, make sure they get the survey, make sure they get this T-47 filled out and get it delivered at the same time. Let's look at how to fill this thing out.
And just an added note, putting it in MLS is not good enough.
It is not considered delivery. Okay. You can try to argue that all day long, put MLS, make sure you take it from MLS as a listing agent and deliver it to the title company, because guess what? Title company does not have access to MLS. Okay. So they cannot consider it delivered. If I were a buyer agent and y'all were a seller agent on this thing, and the 3 days for delivery goes by, I'm going to call the title company and say, hey, do you have a copy of the survey in T-47? I haven't seen it yet. They're going to go, we didn't get it yet. Ding. If I want to hold the sellers to the fire and say, I want a new survey now at your expense, it's automatic. It's going to be at their expense for a new one.
And I've even sent it to title, and title didn't get it to the buyer in time. And title said it's not their responsibility. So as an agent, you need to just go ahead and send it to your buyer's agent.
Very good. It's very true, y'all. It is on you. Listing agents. I can't stress it enough. Get the survey in T-47 delivered. It's one of the easiest things. Hey, I've had 15 and 20-year agents when I was on the title side that would call me and say, hey, can you help? I mean, they're holding my feet to the fire. You know, about 3 years ago, I had a gorgeous, really nice survey. It was on a 2.5 acre tract in Mansfield, beautiful house, like a $750,000, $800,000 house. Then it's probably worth $1 million now. And it had a nice survey. They'd done 6 months prior to selling it. They got it under contract. They said within 3 days they would deliver it. They did not get it done in time. Okay. Went by. They came back and said, hey, here it is. It's a survey we just got done. Nothing has been changed since it. The other agent very well could have just said, hey, that's okay, great. But that agent said, nah, we don't care. We want a new survey. It was $1,800 to get a new survey for that property. And it cost that seller that money. Do not make that mistake. Okay. Make sure you represent your sellers really well. Just get that stuff covered. Okay. Let's look at how to fill this thing out. Okay. On the date at the top, you put today's date. Now, I don't mean June 15th or 16th, whatever day is. I mean the date that you are going to fill this out, right? The date they're going to sign it in front of a notary. That date. Okay. A GF number. Okay. A GF number is a general file number. This is the file number from the title company. Okay. Which means if you don't have a file open on this, okay, you will not have this number. So this number can be left blank. Okay. If you're doing this prior to listing, it can be left blank. If you already have a file opened at a title company, because you had title issues you wanted to get cleared up prior to, and there's a probate deal or heirship stuff, whatever it might be, and you want to go and you got it open, then you can go ahead and put that file number on this, as long as that is going to be the title company that you're going to be using. Okay. Then you would ask the title company, get it from them, and they'll give you their file number for it, and you would fill it in there. The affiant on there, name of affiant or affiants. Okay. This would be either the owners, their name, their actual name, like it is on the contract, or if it's an entity, okay, a business owner or an LLC, something like that, or a trust, okay, you would put the name in that blank, the name of the affiant in that blank. Okay. Right below that, this one's kind of, people get kind of tricked by this occasionally. Address of affiant. This is the current physical address of the owner. Okay. This is not the address of the property. Okay. And I'll say this again. It's the address of the owner or the entity. So for me, if I was selling my house in Arlington, but I was selling it and I put owner's name, I put Andrew Patterson, I would put my address in Conroe on there, right? My physical address. And then I would have the next line down, description of property, is going to be the legal description of the subject property. Okay. So lot 4, block A of, Woodland Heights Edition, Arlington, Texas. Okay. And then county, the county of the subject property would be Tarrant County or whatever it is there. Okay. So make sure that makes sense. It's the current physical address of the affiant, so their home address. And if it's the home address and they live there, then it's the same, obviously. But if they don't live there, it'd be their current physical address and then the legal description of the subject property. So it could be the same, where it would be the address of the property and it's legal. But if they live somewhere else at the time, you put their current address. Okay. Now filling this in, pretty simple. You're dealing with property in Texas. if any of you are ever dealing with property outside of Texas, first of all, depends on if that state uses the T-47 or not. Okay. T-47 is promulgated by Texas Department of Insurance, so they might not have this form. Okay. But in this case, so we put Texas there. Personally appeared the affiant or affiants who, after being sworn, stated a few things. I'm going to breeze through these really quickly. First of all, that they are the owners of the property. Okay. Boom. Okay. That they own it. 2, that they're familiar with the property and the improvements located on the property. So, hey, we own it. We're familiar with it. 3, they're closing a transaction requiring title insurance, and the proposed insured owner, the buyer or the lender, has requested a boundary coverage in this. Okay, which is what they're asking for. Okay, so they're owners. They're familiar with the property. They're closing a transaction. Next one down. To the best of our knowledge and belief, since blank, okay, since, I'm going to give you a hint, the date the survey was completed. Okay, sometimes people put in here the date they got the survey. Okay, things like that. That's not what they really want to see here. They want to see the date of the survey completed. Where do you get the date the survey was completed? On the survey. Okay, on the survey. So we looked at one a minute ago. It said 11/6 of 2019. I would put, so from November 6th of 2019. Okay, since that survey, there have been no construction projects such as new structures, additional buildings, rooms, garages, et cetera, swimming pools, right? Or other permanent structures. Okay. There have been no changes in the location of boundary fences or boundary walls. So we haven't moved the fences, right? If they've moved fences, if they said they had an acre and they had a fence up here at the front and they moved it back 30 feet to a different part, or they moved it up so they could have their dogs in the back half of the acre and they had their kids in the swimming pool in the front part and they added a new fence, would that be a change? Yes, they would have to note it right here in this blank. Okay. C, construction projects on immediately adjoining property which encroach on the property. So if they added a pergola, Michelle, like you brought up, and it encroaches over the property next door, they would have to put that in there. Any conveyances, any replattings, any easement grants or dedications, such as a new utility line by any party affecting the property. So if they've changed anything, if they've replatted, if they took 2 acres and they platted one, or they replatted, they resurveyed off an acre to somewhere else to sell it, and now they have this survey here on an acre. Okay, if they've done that, then they would have to note that here. Okay, so except for the following: if they have made no changes on the property, they've owned it for a couple of years, they haven't added anything at all, no permanent changes to the outside of the property, then you have to have them write the word none, N-O-N-E, right here. N-O-N-E. They would actually write that in. Technically, if it's not written in there, it's incomplete. Okay, so you need to write that in there. Okay, any questions so far on this? Good. Okay. Next down here, y'all, first of all, it says, except the following, if none, write none. If there are changes, okay, if they've added a pool, if they added 10 foot by 30 foot concrete patio, covered patio, whatever it is, they need to write it in right here as best they can. Okay. If it's a whole lot of stuff they've done, write C Exhibit A and add an attached Exhibit A to it and say, added 10 foot by 30 foot, this, added whatever they've done. Okay. Added decking in the back of the property, shown on survey in parentheses, and they could pencil draw it in on a copy of the survey, not on the original, make a copy of it. Okay. And they can send all that over. There's a possibility it might still get accepted, but they have to be truthful about any changes they've made. Okay. It says on here, we understand that the title company is relying on the truthfulness of the statements made in this affidavit. Okay. The affidavit is made for the benefit of the other parties and does not constitute a warranty or guarantee the location of the improvements. They're not saying, hey, we're not guaranteeing this is exactly correct, but this is about this is to the best of our knowledge where we have it. Okay. And then that they have no liability to the title company that's going to issue the policy or the policies should the information in this affidavit be incorrect. What this paragraph is talking about is that if the seller doesn't be 100% truthful about their statements on this paragraph, that the title company, if they have a claim on the survey and it's incorrect, then they would have to go back after the seller. Okay, that's what they would do on there for not being 100% truthful and possibly take them to court. So you want to make sure they're being very honest about it, do a really good job of sharing the information. Y'all, if it's a major structure, a casita, guest house, if it's add-on to the house, if it's a swimming pool, things like that, 99 times out of 100, if not 100 out of 100, the lender and the title company will not accept it and require a new one. Okay. At the bottom, these little bitty small lines here is where the signatures of the sellers, the owners, the affiants goes. Okay. Signature one on the top line. If they have two signatures, bottom line if needed. Okay. And keep in mind, this is completed in front of a notary. So don't sign it and then take it to a notary. That would defeat the purpose of the notary, right? So the notary has to see it first. Signed in front of the notary. And then this bottom section is completed by the notary on there. And then you have a complete T-47 that you would then take with the survey and deliver it to the title company and to the buyer. Okay. So good there. Any questions on that?
I got a question. If an agent is a notary, I'm not, but if I was, could you notarize this for your clients or no, because you have a vested interest in the contract?
The latter.
Okay.
Not notarize anything that's on a, that's kind of TREC rules prohibits that. Anything that you have a vested interest in, you cannot notarize documents on.
Gotcha.
So always go in front of a notary. Y'all, easiest thing is have your title partner, okay? Your title company that you prefer to work with. We've got several. If you don't have one, let us know. But they all are notaries. They have one there because they do closing documents. You can easily have the seller, or you go with them, take the survey, take this T-47 up there, or typically most title companies, mine that I work with, you take the survey up there, have the seller go up there, they'll print out a good T-47, have it automatically filled in for them, have them sign it, write the word none or anything they need to add on it in there, and sign it right there in front of them and have it completed. And then the title company has it already. They can scan it and email it back to you, and you can get it over to the buyer all at the same time. It's really good practices that way. Okay. If they can't get to the title company, most banks have notaries, FedExes, things like that are all places that have notaries that can do these T-47s. Okay. Good question. All right. Those are T-47s. I want to go over one last thing, and Michelle, just kind of bring your situation back in a little bit. What if the property is in a flood zone? Okay. This is just a little bit of information, then we're going to wrap up. Okay. If it's in a flood zone, you might need to get an elevation survey, also known as an elevation certificate, okay, or a topographical survey, okay? Now, they can be different things. Topographical is what shows like looking on top. If y'all remember back in science class, back when you were in school, looking over the top of a map, and it showed a mountain or a volcano, and it showed like these little squiggly lines all around it, and it shows the elevation of the property, how the mountain kind of builds up in pieces. That's a topographical survey. It's shown from the onlook of the top, but it's showing what the land is doing in relation to how high or low it is. That's what an elevation certificate shows, and that elevation survey is. If you find out that your property is in a flood zone, any part of it, even if it's a corner of an acre property, okay, more than likely the lender is going to require an elevation certificate, okay, just to show that, hey, the property is in a flood zone, but you might be able to get out of paying flood insurance, or at least determine the flood insurance rate by getting an elevation survey. Okay. An elevation certificate is a document that lists a building's location, so the house's location, its lowest point of elevation in relation to the flood zone, and any other characteristics dealing with that, according to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as, y'all have all heard of this, FEMA. Okay, you've heard of the FEMA flood zone, right? Whether it's a 500-year flood zone, 100-year floodway, the flood zone, the floodway itself, which is even more critical because that means that's where water actually runs if there is a flood. All of those things, and y'all can see the FEMA flood map. Believe it or not, it's on Netris. When you use your MLS, you can click the flood map and see it. Okay, you can also go to FEMA's website and see the flood zone as well. That is what the lenders and insurance agents use to determine flood rates and if it needs insurance. used to enforce local building ordinances, and it helps determine the flood insurance rates or determine if it's even required. Okay, let's look at a couple examples. Y'all, here's an example. This is actually a site plan, but I want to show you an example of what it looks like. You see these lines in here, all these little kind of curvy lines. Okay, that's what I meant by kind of a topographical survey. This is an example of what an elevation certificate might look like. Okay, and it's showing that, hey, right here in this area, this is either building up, okay, or going down, right? It could be a reservoir, right, where it's going down. It's showing you what it does on here, okay? It's showing you kind of propose what the building's going to be on this, okay? In this case, it's going down, and this is a site plan because they're trying to use us as a conventional septic system area, right? Saying that it's going to pool down into this, and that's where everybody's sewage and waste is going to flow to. A lot of site plans for developments use this type, okay? That's an example of one, okay? Oh, sorry, go back real quick. Ooh, how can I go back? Sorry. Along with that, what you'll see, typically what they'll show as an example is they'll show the house, and you might only have, I don't have a good example on here, but you typically will see this shown on there. You'll see a house on the survey, and it might show that it's barely in the flood zone. And then on here in the notes, okay, the surveyor will note what the lowest elevation of where the house starts, basically where the foundation of the house is and what elevation it's at in relation to the flood zone. And if it can show that, typically, if it can show that it's a foot or more outside of that, and different lenders require different things, but if they can show that the actual house itself is outside of that, they might not require flood insurance. They can determine that they don't need it. Or they might say, hey, it's in this part of it, it's high enough that we're only going to require this type of insurance coverage, and it might be less expensive to get it. Okay. Or they might say, hey, it's full on in the floodway, and you've got to have flood insurance. And it could range anywhere from several $100s a month or to thousands of dollars a year, whatever it is. It depends. It could be $300-400 a year. It could be $300, $400, $500, $600 a month. You'll have to get with your insurance company and lender on that. Okay. So Michelle, to go back to your question earlier, you kind of mentioned, hey, this survey, right, is shown part of it's in the survey, or it's part of it's in the flood zone, and it might affect where y'all put that house, right? So now you're going to want to probably go through the extra expense, okay? And they run about the cost of a survey as well. Most elevation certificates run anywhere from $400 or $500 or more to get a topographical elevation survey and find out at what level you could maybe build the house up on, build the dirt up, maybe do it and get it out of that flood zone so you don't need flood insurance coverage. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
That is the next route I would have you go on that. Is I would go reach out to the surveyor and say, hey, can you show me what part of this? You're looking at the survey, you can see that it's in the flood zone. You can say, okay, well, that's going to affect where we're at. Maybe reach out to a lender and say, what would y'all require on this? And they'll say, well, it would depend on the elevation. And they're going to say, go get an elevation certificate. And then you would want to reach out to the surveyor and ask them, would they mind going out, or a surveyor, there's lots of them out there, have them go out, say, here's the existing survey. Can you go do an elevation certificate, an elevation survey on this to let us know where we need to be at in relation for flood insurance coverage?
Well, my concern is that this is going to be a cash build,
Yeah.
but those problems could affect our ability to sell the house.
Absolutely. Well, and when you get to that point, I always say, go ahead and do your due diligence now. That way, when you are marketing the property to sell it, question, hey, can I have a survey? And then you give it to them, and now the new buyer coming in to get a loan to buy the property, their lender comes back and says, it's in the flood zone. You have to get insurance coverage. Can the buyer back out? You bet. That's a new thing, new knowledge they didn't know. So I would encourage you to get it up front, know it, try to build the property in a way that it might not need flood insurance. Verify that with a lender and an insurance company, okay, or maybe multiple insurance companies. It's a lot more work on your part at this venture of it, but that's what I would encourage you to do.
Well, I think right now we're just going to sell it. We're going to sell it.
Yeah,
but only after we get that flood line removed from the survey.
If it can be removed, the surveyor might come back and say, no, it's in the flood zone. The flood zone changed a few years back. They change it when new rains come in, and it changes the property, changes how water flows. as new, neighborhoods are being built, it can affect the way water flows, and that could change the floodway. That's why FEMA redoes their map every once in a while. They redid it a few years back, and it changed some people. So keep in mind.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Absolutely. This other page right here is what an elevation certificate actually looks like. It's where they go and actually put the information about the building itself, the flood insurance rate map, and then the building elevation information at the bottom. The survey is attached to that. That's kind of what an example of it looks like, just so y'all know. Okay. Well done. Y'all all stayed awake. I'm highly impressed. I know it's a lot of information, but that is surveys and T-47s in Texas. So do we have any other questions on that today? Pretty cool. Y'all learn something? One thing?
Yes.
Three things, a couple things? Okay, good. I love it.
Absolutely.
I know it's a lot of stuff, but hopefully y'all can take that. Like I said, I do have this recorded. I'll get it added to our YouTube stuff and upload to the front agents for y'all if you need it after that. Other than that, if you ever have a question about a survey or T-47 or a question about something like this, y'all know who to call. Reach out, let me know, and y'all go have a wonderful Wednesday. All righty.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank y'all. Y'all have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.